Hello, I'm here to talk about behavior driven development. It's all about testing, so if anyone thought behavior was some AI thing, it's not. You're going to be disappointed. I've traveled from Norway. That should tell you something about how passionate I am about behavior driven development. It's a long trip, but Ramesh, all the way from India, so I could tell he was more passionate. With my missus, I live in Norway, where we have 3 boys together. It's not these 3 boys, because I'm afraid they'll come later and find themselves on YouTube and will scream, "Consent, Dad." I just took 3 random boys on the internet. They look even more happy. I work also in Norway at a company called Unicast. It's based in Norway and in the US. I work remotely. So DevOps, or a platform engineer. I recently found out that platform engineer has a higher salary, so I keep telling me that I'm a platform engineer. We're predominantly scientists as my colleagues, and there were a few engineers, and that's gonna color this presentation also. They just call me tech support. Even gave me this t-shirt that arrived in my post with this nice little airflow thing and everything. I had to pay taxes for it myself, so that's how much they love me, I guess. We've been doing airflow since 2018. That's just before I was hired. We started using Composer in Google. We're highly into the Google Cloud. Currently, we're doing some major code refactoring on our Airflow code. We're basically rewriting some of the config. We have DAG factories, and we're trying to refactor them into using something created in 2020. This AIP 31 is about decorators, but it also introduced XCOM dependencies. So you can use XCOM, and the glue between the tasks automatically is added. You don't have to explicitly set the dependencies. Makes the configuration of DAGs quite nice, I think. In order to do these major refactoring, we figured out we needed automated tests. And what to test? Yeah, well, in our case, validation, import errors and warnings and stuff like that, rendering of tasks, execution of tasks, and task dependencies. We wanted them to stay exactly the same for any code we changed. And some of these are quite difficult. Like this is taken from our beloved Apache Airflow repository. It's the code just to test the rendering of a task or an operator. It's quite advanced. At least I think it's quite advanced. Here's another one. It's for running the execute method, or just have a task being run. It's also in the repository of Apache Airflow. Also quite advanced. I must admit I tried to find the most advanced one, because that brings my presentation in a better light. And this one is from Astronomer. It's not that advanced, but it's how you can test for all of your tasks adhering to a specific thing. In this time, it's retries. But we're, as I said, predominantly scientists, and they kind of hate this. Test-driven development, that's a Greek word to them. And it's hard to try to convince them that it's good to have this safety net for us in the future. So I try to challenge myself, can it be more readable? Can I make it so that I don't have to repeat all this session and creation of a diagram in order to make unit tests? And then I went back to a fellow I met early in my career. It's called Aslak Hellesøy. He's created something called Cucumber. Anyone ever heard about Cucumber? Whoa. Yeah, he's quite a character. He was once named within the 52 most brilliant programmers in the world. I can't remember who mentioned it, but I find him especially inspirational. He's a brilliant kind of guy. And he was one of those evangelists of behavior-driven development. He taught our company about that. It's basically a way to describe code behavior. It's a documentation which can also be executable. It consists like this. It's a feature and then a description or a narrative of the feature, what it's going to do and why it's going to do it. And then you have a bunch of acceptance criteria like these scenarios. Also often mentioned within behavior-driven development is the three amigos. So the language should be so readable and so descriptable that you could use both product owners and development and testing could all collaborate on this document and make it a living document and could be executable. I've yet to experience that work perfectly in progress, but I always kind of like this, the acceptance criteria, the given, when, then. So the given says something about the state of the system, the when, the action that's going to be done, and the then is just the asserts. In this case, it's not Monday, or it's not Friday, it's Wednesday. The text files themselves are plain text files without .feature ending. It's a syntax called gherkin. Best known interpreters are the cucumber, and for Python, it's behave. That's the best one. So let's look at behave, because Python is what we're going to use in Airflow. You can write, for example, something like this. It's a simple acceptance criteria where we want to check if we want to run a query, and the result should have one row. It's pretty simple. So you have this text file, and then you have a step implementation. Step implementations in Behave are written as some decorators, and you're throwing them inside of a set path, like feature steps. You can name the file whatever you like. It will be picked up by Behave, and then it will execute this. The core concept of this is this context object, which you can manipulate and you can add variables to it. And you can use them later. So here we say we just grab the SQL, we put it on the context. We then have a when statement, another decorator, where we use this and we execute it and we put the result on the context for later use. And at the end, we assert this, that we also then take the number of rows, we take which then becomes a parameter, and we can assert it later. Kind of cool. This is another example, which is from our code, where I check every BigQuery operator should have the label turbine environment, because we want to use that for cost overview and stuff like that. You could even run it test-driven. This is another example from our production code where I want to test for hotspots. So I just populate a database with some data, and then I run some clustering, and I should not have any results at the end. That runs fine. And this looks nice, right? I think it looks nice. But it's not a breeze. It's what pun intended, but I can't see Jarek here in the audience, so he'll watch this on YouTube later. It's kind of hard to work with because it's these gherkin files, and then you have some regex magic. You can see the regex magic in the examples, and then it's executes some Python code at the end. For this to work properly, you often have to install some plugins in either PyCharm, IntelliJ, or VS Code, or something like that, in order to get code completion, IntelliSense, and stuff like that. And the devs be like, yeah, even I have a hard time making this work properly. How do I debug this? How do I make code completion work? How do I, where's the stack trace? Things like that. Basically, the examples I showed you earlier from the production code, they've been deleted from the code once I switched teams. So it was mainly I who maintained this stuff. Also, we have all of our Airflow code in many teams is in a monorepo, and Behave wasn't created for sharing step implementations in between projects such as that. So another hard thing. So I thought, this doesn't fly. People don't use it. So how about PyTest? So I tried to do that. And let's take this simple DAG, for example. It creates a random number. It has two tasks. creates a random number and then prints the random number. So the printing is dependent on the creation of a random number. And then you could create it like this, given a DAG, and then you manipulate the outcome of the creation of the random number. Say it's supposed to be 22. Then given the task printing of a random number, when I render it and execute it, then it should match equal to 22. And this is a working example. But you can do other things, like you can test for warnings in your code. For example, if you're doing airflow upgrades, you just change the airflow version and then you can check, how's my warnings now? You could set a limit for this. You can check for import errors and the number of DAGs, that the number of DAGs stays the same and stuff like that. You can do parameterized. You can check for the tasks remains the same in your DAG. There's no changes there. When you get all the task IDs and so on, so on, so. You could check for dependencies. Like tasks should stay the same. They have the same downstream dependencies. Yeah, things like that. And queries. Check using SQL Fluff. You can check for having a valid parsed SQL from your rendered templates. One thing is to just check your SQL files or something like that. I've found that there's a lot of changes going on the minute you just use that SQL file within your BigQuery operator or something like that, and then start using Jinja templating, and suddenly the variables are not there anymore, or some X comma is missing and something like that. This has saved me a few times. And a thing I tested last week, actually, so this slide is brand new. Had a hackathon and tested some data contracts where we want to check that the output follows a specific schema. And borrowing something from Swagger, I thought, okay, maybe I can use some example data and stuff like that. So I tested also executing. So I can actually run a BigQuery operator, in this case, query. I run the task and I verify the output afterwards to check that, yep, it's equal to this. So this, I feel now I am where I want to be. I can do test-driven BigQuery and a search for results. Implementation. Well, it's basically just the behave and the cucumber stuff. As I said, it's this context object that is the core of it. So implementing this isn't too hard. Actually, the code we saw, I think it's like 300 lines or something. I put it up on GitHub. So it's basically having just a data class that contains all of these variables that I'm going to manipulate. They could be, for example, a DAG background, DAG, or task, or execution date, and stuff like that, which I just keep. It's kind of work in progress, all of this. And there you can then just have a DAG. The purpose of this is, of course, hiding all the complexity of creating a test and making it easy to create tests for everyone, data scientists and myself included, because I can't remember shit. Given a DAG, easy implementation like this. I'm hiding a few stuff like airflow variables and temporary directory or stuff like that. Then it should match. Here I use something called PyHamcrest. Who has ever used Hamcrest for Java? Yeah. So basically that I don't have to write anything. It's just, I just use a library readable. So I can then create either my own matchers and stuff like that. And I can match whatever I'd like, as you saw in the previous samples. And then when you run it, you could get an output like this. If you do it from the terminal, you could do HTML from classic PyTests. Here you see 272 tests. They run very fast because I save the DAG bag. You load the DAG bag once and then you just reuse it all the time. You could have it in your CI/CD, in this case GitHub Actions. So here you see a recent run for 279 tests in 1 minute. You could run it in VS Code. Yes, we have time for demo. I thought, well, how about some live coding? I actually didn't create this one, so I'm closing in on people actually using something I made. I'll con them. Yep, I think this was in this example as well. It's just testing a valid query. This is in VS Code. So yes, as you see, it's already run green. I run it. I can also debug it. That's quite cool. So let's try to debug this particular test. I find this very cool because, again, now even debug within Airflow code, like, because it's open source and everything in Python, I can just jump in, I can change Airflow code. I have the debug console, so now I can just write bdd hit, because that's the thing, it's always hitting on the context. I see that it's a H3 catalog. I can do bdd hit. I know that this is a subclass of the BigQuery insert job operator, so I know that it has configuration. It says, yep, there I have it. Sometimes I find it then interesting to see what's the query. How does that look? And then I can just, yeah, that looks like that. And then I can compare and stuff like that. I find that quite interesting. And recently, I now haven't opened for particular cases. I haven't at all opened Airflow. I just run my test, running test, doing it test driven, and then firing up at the GitHub, seeing the test run, everything. Also, this is using SQL Fluff, so later I'll add not only parsing, but checking for violations and stuff like that. Yeah. And also you can see for running multiple tests, like here's the biggest project where we have the most tests, because that's where I'm doing the most of the refactoring. And I feel they are pleasantly fast. Yeah. 200 and something tests going on here. And again, they are so fast because they reuse this. And apart from many other samples I see for using Airflow, it uses your home directory to create an Airflow. So you get, once you switch project, you mess it up. So this one, I just create an Airflow home inside of the temp folder. I very much like this because I feel that it adds now a language for us data scientists and data engineers to talk. I feel that for the first time in a long time, I'm able to do test-driven Airflow and probably also test-driven BigQuery in the near future. It's quite a work in progress, really. Some of this code is on GitHub, but I've done more on our monorepo. So if people find it interesting, I'm Judo Ole. I do judo, or I love judo, and my name is Ole, and I created it 20 years ago, and I can't get rid of it, that handle. So I'm that at everything. Ask me, and maybe we can do this as an open source thing if anyone else finds it interesting.